Hey, this is Jonah with Gray Area. Welcome to our series Spotlight, where our mission is to build a bigger and more united house music community by sharing new and exciting artists, festivals, and event brands with you. In this interview, you'll hear from Sohmi, a talented pianist, vocalist, and a rising star in the world of minimal house and techno. Be sure to like this video and subscribe for more interviews like this. So, something I just start with asking everybody is if you have a moment or maybe even a time period kind of earlier in your life when you felt like you really fell in love with dance music.
Oh, wow. So I feel like that question is always interesting for me because I didn't really come into dance music sort of as like the dance music that I'm around and in now. Obviously, like there's other forms of dance music that I can think of that I listen to, even like dating back to like K-pop in Korea, and the sound of K-pop back in the 90s sort of was almost very European dance music-ish. Like it was very influenced by that. So I guess, in a way you could consider that was maybe some of my earliest exposure. But in terms of like modern underground house and techno as we know it today, like I really didn't come into that until maybe just 5 years ago. So yeah, I guess I wasn't that young when I happened upon, this genre and this world. Um, but for sure, I mean, I can, because it wasn't that long ago. I remember it very clearly. It was actually at Coachella, and I had just moved to Los Angeles, and I didn't have a lot of friends, but the few that I had befriended sort of were like, "Hey, you should come with us to Coachella. I don't know if you've ever been, but like, it's this big thing we have out here in SoCal." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And honestly, I had never even been to a festival until then, like, in my life.
Oh, wow.
So right, so like my first festival ever was just straight into it was Coachella. Had didn't really know the group I was with. I knew like one or two of the people in it, and just went along for the ride and had my mind blown. Um, and yeah, they luckily the group I was with had great taste in music, so they brought me to like all the way, in my opinion, all the really good stuff. Like we went and saw like Manoli Tough, and we saw Rufus, and um, yeah, this was my first introduction to dance music, and it just changed my life. Yeah.
That's a pretty solid first festival to go to. I think that's definitely
Right.
definitely a bigger scale than what most people ever went to. It's funny. I actually remember that the first thing I ever saw was in high school, and it was like Destructo at Terminal 5. But
Wow.
I had like an 11 p.m. curfew because I was 16, and so I didn't even get to see him. Like I just watched the
Oh, right.
openers.
Right. Because we like when we're young, we don't realize, I don't know, the headliner doesn't come out until like midnight or one, or, depending on what city you're in, maybe 4 a.m.
I know it's something I've had to explain to my mom about my job. I'm like, yeah, I know that like you think I work in the concert live event industry, but like the headliner comes on at 1 a.m. So, lots of late nights.
Yeah.
You mentioned it in that you kind of had some K-pop influence as a kid, but I'm just wondering kind of when you were growing up, what kind of music was played in the house, and do you remember what you were
Yeah.
listening to?
Um, yeah. So my dad was, I mean, he still is, but especially when I was younger, I just have more memories of him playing music in the house, and he was a big music fan. So I think he had a big influence in shaping what some of my taste would, become when I was little. But he played all kinds of stuff. He had um, a lot of R&B and soul and stuff like that, but he also listened to a lot of like American rock. So like he'd be playing Kansas and like
Ooh.
Chicago and and stuff like that. And what else? Oh, he liked Hall and Oates and like Earth, Wind and Fire. But then all of a sudden there would be, some random Korean radio station on as well, and it would be playing whatever was, popular in the moment. And I don't know, I'm thinking back to like 1998, and yeah, like I said, a lot of the K-pop then was influenced um, by, I would say, like European sort of dance music and pop, and also American 90s hip hop and R&B. So it was like a weird mishmash of all those influences with like Korean lyrics and production, so with our own spin on it. So yeah, there was a lot going on musically in the house, I guess. Very, and Stevie Wonder too, my dad loved, and how could I forget? He also loved Elton John. That was like
Oh,
absolute favorite was Elton John. Um, and so, yeah, I think from early on, I developed this love and appreciation for melody, um, and kind of like nostalgia, and a little bit of like melodrama in the melodies and stuff, because you get that with Elton John.
absolutely. Well, it definitely plays into your music, but we'll wait to touch on that for a little bit. I
Okay.
want to step on any of that because I it's been interesting. Obviously, you've only been producing officially, for a couple of years now, but
Yeah.
I feel like the journey that you've kind of been through just listening to all your music is pretty amazing. But before we get into that, I think one of the things about you is, if I'm not mistaken, you kind of started DJing, before you produced. And
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you have a memory from the first time that you ever had the opportunity to DJ, whether it was at a club or just for some friends at a house party.
Yeah. So a group of my friends, that are super into dance music and stuff, and were my frequent festival mates. We would all go to festivals a lot together and stuff. One of them had recently moved to a new apartment in like Santa Monica, I believe. So he was like, you should come and DJ for the first time ever, for us, as part of my housewarming, if you want. And I think at that point I had been, DJing by myself in my bedroom for like 1 month. Like I really did not know what I was doing. And I was like super excited at the thought of like, oh my gosh, okay, this is a great chance to like play in front of people. But also I was so nervous. I mean, I don't know, it's silly now that I think about it. I'm like, these are my friends. Like they're gonna, they're not gonna judge me or, be mean to me or anything, no matter how it turns out. But I remember bringing my like ex DJ setup over all the way to his. Like I packed it up in my car, and like blankets and like, all my like cables and everything. And I was like, okay, this is my first gig. And it was interesting. It was an interesting performance. Let's just say that.
I'm sure, I can imagine. I feel like whenever it's like DJing for your friends, it's almost harder because like no one is gonna say anything to
Yeah,
you if you suck,
right,
but like
right.
you want to be great because like you just want your friends to have a good time.
Yeah, you want to like impress your friends. Yeah, I remember like I had uh the AB, like I didn't have the AB like channel fader like on through. And so I was like, my hand would keep hitting the fader and I wouldn't
Oh
know what I was
no.
doing. And like so like the like audio would just like cut out, and I'd be like, I don't know what I did. I stopped the music. It just such, yeah, rookie
Oh man.
mistakes or whatever. But yeah, I guess you have to go through that to learn. And thankfully it was just in front of my friends and not at a club somewhere. So
That's pretty good. It's funny. I've heard some. It sounds like you were a little better than some of the other people I've talked to. Where a lot of these guys in Europe, especially, had this experience of like, I'd never DJ'd before in my life, and then I somehow got like booked to play a club and showed up and like plugged into the Pioneer CDJ and like didn't know what to do. And I'm like, that sounds terrifying.
that the thought of that gives me like super anxiety. I'm just imagining that. Like,
Yeah.
no.
Well, speaking of live performances, obviously, you've gotten a start to your career recently, and I think you have a lot of pretty great gigs booked kind of in the coming year, I'm sure. But are there any festivals or venues either in the States or elsewhere that are kind of a dream for you to play at?
Venues or festivals. Um, I think just um, anywhere in Europe at the moment feels like, a bucket list item, I guess, partially just because of all the travel restrictions we've had for the past year. It's almost just that alone has made going back to Europe, even to visit, let alone play, seem like some very distant, unattainable um, feat to accomplish. But yeah, I think just I would love to get more experience playing anywhere abroad. Europe is included in that, obviously, but also throughout Asia. Um, I can't even really pinpoint just one dream festival. There's so many out there. Um, but just playing more internationally in general, I think is a any of that would feel like a dream come true, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many beautiful stages across the world. And I think as an artist,
Yeah,
it's pretty validating to, know you have those fans out there. Well,
exactly.
I know that in New York, we're very excited to see you at the Mirage. That's going to be a pretty special one.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Just kind of the last thing before we start really getting into your career, something else I like to ask pretty much everyone, which is if you had the opportunity to kind of organize a club night where you're playing and you can pick any artist you want to play with you, play before you, play after you, who would be on that bill?
Oh my gosh,
You can pick as many artists as you want.
that's so hard. Oh
I know it's
no.
an unfair question.
Oh my goodness. Are we allowed to like come back to that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we may have to circle back to that. I'm like, this is too hard to answer at the moment.
I know. It's everyone has that reaction because they're like, oh man, if my friends listen to this, they're gonna get pissed that I didn't put them on it.
Oh, right. I hadn't even thought of it from that angle. Okay, yeah, we definitely have to circle back on this.
All right, we'll turn back to it on the end. Well,
Okay.
one of the things I wanted to get into a little bit more on a serious note, I think something that is really important that you've discussed pretty openly in previous interviews is just mental health and, addiction and kind of some of those issues. And I think it's something that everyone is more conscious of these days, and especially in the, artist world where it's a very demanding life and it's just obviously there's so many factors going on that you're trying to balance while also advancing your career. um
Right.
I'm wondering if you could just touch on that. And did you feel like music kind of was always an escape for you, or did music become sort of the avenue in which to almost express some of these issues that you were dealing with and work through it?
I guess both. I think, yeah, the idea of music as sort of a place for me to escape, I think that started pretty young. Um, I studied classical piano my whole life growing up, and obviously at times the practicing for it was super grueling, and the last thing I wanted to do, and especially when you're a kid, you like want to go out and play with your friends, but like I stuck with it for a long time. And once you get past the phase of like sucking at something, then you can really start to enjoy it, like the doing of it, right? And so yeah, obviously when I was little I wasn't maybe as good initially, but over the years, I got much better at it, and that's when I found that I could actually really escape in playing piano. Um, and I would just, sometimes I'd be really overwhelmed by school or life, or I'd get into an argument with my mom or something over, something school related, or me being out too late and being rebellious, and I'd get really upset, and I'd sit down at the piano sometimes and just like play, and play melancholy stuff, and just like just let myself bathe in the in the emotions of it all. So yeah, I think music has always been a kind of escape for me. Um, but it wasn't until getting into dance music and production that I felt like I was really able to like express maybe more of myself through it. Like, playing piano is a great outlet, but it's not like my compositions. So once I started producing and getting to tell some of like my own sort of personal story through it, I think, yeah, that sort of addresses the second part of your question or your statement. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I mean, I appreciate you just touching on that. It's such an important topic these days, and I think it's really, to have somebody in your position with influence to just be talking openly about it is really great. Um, kind of piggybacking just on the piano piece. You're also a vocalist, very talented one, and it
Oh,
obviously
thank you.
it comes through in a lot of your songs. I'm wondering, how did you like did you always sing as a kid, or how did that come into your music? And then the follow-up is, as a vocalist, do you sometimes feel like how does that impact your production process? Do you feel like you always need to have your lyrics on a song? Is it a
Right.
conscious decision? What goes into that?
Right. Ooh, those are really good questions. Um, so the singing, okay, so the first part of the question. I don't remember this, but apparently I started singing like when I was just, I don't know, before I could even talk. And that's what my mom says, that I was just sort of babbling like melodies and humming things. And I was like, I think like 1 year old when that started. And so, uh, I always find the question of like nature versus nurture, which is maybe for a separate topic or a separate conversation, super fascinating. But clearly there's always been something in me that just, was inclined to express myself vocally. Um, and yeah, I always loved singing. It honestly came even before I started playing the piano. And I grew up doing musical theater and singing in choir my whole life. So in tandem with studying classical piano and taking examinations and stuff like that for that, I was also acting in musicals and singing in different like a cappella groups and stuff like that. And yeah, so I think that naturally that it feels like a natural way for me to sort of like storytell through singing, because I think of my experience doing musical theater where you are storytelling and you are playing a character. Um, and I feel like I bring some of that into what I do vocally. I don't know, a lot of times when I write lyrics or deliver some kind of performance, whether it's for my own track or if it's a feature for someone else, I almost like create a character um, who is singing about some story like for that song. And yeah, to answer the second part of your question, I do think that I approach production maybe in a unique way in that I tend to think of melodies first, or I tend to think of like a song concept first. And even if it ends up being something sort of like a dubbier track where there isn't like, a verse and a chorus, but just little vocal chops, it may have still started out as like a song concept in my head. So I would say that, yeah, I often lead my productions with vocal ideas. And so it's a huge part of my songwriting process, I'd say. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think as I mentioned, it's like, and as you've said, something that's really just so great about your music is it's not, falling into one box over and over again, which I think can be, a struggle for artists who are trying to find themselves. Kind of some of your first releases, the remix of Runaway, the Somebody Like You with Lubelski, even the Again EP, I think objectively they had a little bit more of that like club feel, maybe a little more four on the floor. I was just wondering kind of if you could tell us about some of your early influences and, what was pushing you to kind of make that style of music.
Yeah. So, I think, I don't know if I mentioned this in our conversation yet, but like pop and R&B were definitely some of my early and major influences. Um, and as well as classical piano. It's like these two sort of very different ends of the musical spectrum, but both equally kind of had a big role in my formative years of as a music lover. And so in something like Runaway, that was the very first sort of production of any sort that I did. And even though it was a remix, I really didn't use a ton of the production stems that I was given. I think I was like really ambitious because it was my first one. I wanted to sort of make my mark, and so most of that remix, I programmed everything from scratch, the drums and everything, and I really was like hell bent on including like piano in it. I was like, okay, like I want to introduce myself to the world and kind of uh, put my stamp on it in a unique way. And so there's like this piano part that's kind of prominent, like in the build up and stuff. And that, yeah, the little riff that I did, I feel like that was sort of, influenced by like my studies of classical music, maybe a little jazz. Um, and then as far as the Again EP, I'd say that one was very, in my mind, influenced by like R&B. So, something like Again, the track, I had Me and You by Cassie in mind when I was making that. Like I was trying to channel Cassie, Me and You vibes in that, but house. And you know, 2000 and like modern sort of. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question,
No,
but
absolutely, absolutely. Um, you know, from that point on, like I think kind of starting in mid 2020, you start going on the serious run. Like you put out "Want You to Love Me" with Astral Works, and then from there you start hitting these like very high level artist driven labels. You know, you get the Sparks EP with Danny Howard, the Odd One Out, which by the way I think that might be one of my favorite things you've put out. Like I was listening
thank
to it
you.
and I was just like, oh, like that, this is hitting.
I think that's a good reaction.
Yeah. a little stank face.
Yes.
You know, and then recently the collaboration with Booka Shade. You know, for someone like you where you really started so recently and you're just getting such immediate recognition, I'm wondering if you could just touch on kind of what it means to have this sort of recognition from such a diverse group of artists. And then also how did you connect with them?
Yeah. Honestly, it feels pretty surreal. Um, and I kind of hope that that feeling like never goes away. You know, I hope this like never becomes a normalized thing. Just to keep me on my toes and to keep me appreciative. You know, I really, really feel, yeah, just kind of mind blown by it all still. And it feels really good to be seen and heard in that way. You know, like there just aren't like as as recently as I came into this, you know, in the last few years, um, yeah, I guess I still haven't really, you know, seen too many um, examples of people doing this who like look like myself, you know, Korean women, you know, I mean, it's amazing that we do have a handful of very prominent, successful Korean women in the dance music industry today, but um, obviously Peggy Goo and Park Hye-jin and people like that, but it's still like there's still you can still list them off on like one hand, you know, and so at the end of the day, that's not very many, and so to be able to kind of join in their on their warpath, I guess, and have the opportunity to make the kind of music I make, which yeah, it isn't sort of I guess the norm. I mean, you know, there I obviously operate within like the framework of familiar dance music, right? Like at the end of the day, you know, I'm still making house music, I'm still making techno, you know, I'm not completely reinventing the paradigm, but you know, I'm putting a sort of unique stamp on it, you know, vocally driven, R&B influences, K-pop influences, all kind of like mixed in there. So to have my music sort of recognized and appreciated, as weird as it is to me sometimes, even like I'm like, I don't know if people are going to get this or like this. It feels really good. And as far as getting connected with you know, some of the names that you mentioned, honestly, just Instagram. Yeah, it's the good old IG DM, you know.
Never fails.
Never fails. Yeah, I just think it's yeah, it's an incredible platform. It's done so much for me. I was just honestly getting in touch with, you know, Josh Butler and Booka Shade was as simple as an Instagram DM. So that's I don't really have a cooler story than that
Oh, that's
as
pretty
far as how
great.
I got in touch with them. Yeah.
Are you and Josh Butler, do you guys have music out or are you working on something right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. So right after the Sparks EP with Danny, a little like I think like 2 weeks after that release, Josh and I had a release on his label together called Sunday Sunset.
Oh, okay,
And
okay, okay.
yeah, and you know, just in terms of streaming numbers, it's probably one of the it's performed one of the best in terms of the music that I've worked on. And yeah, it's a sort of feel good, a sort of timeless feeling, like deep house track, I'd say, a minimal deep house track.
He really knows how to do that. I had the opportunity to interview him as well, and I mean, just an unbelievably nice guy and super humble.
So
It's
nice. Yes.
um, you know, you obviously touched on just kind of some of the prominent Korean artists that are in your space, and as you mentioned, you know, there are probably less than there should be, and I'm just curious from your perspective. You know, it seems like there's a big music scene there, but I'm wondering if you feel like is the house and electronic scene in Korea growing, or do you think it's still very geared towards kind of the K-pop sound?
Oh, no, I would say, it's definitely growing. I mean, I had the opportunity to go back and perform in Korea in 2019 at Ultra in June, and I got to spend a little bit of time that summer, kind of, and by a little bit of time, I mean like, I don't know, a few days, because I was out there for like a week or two, but I got to hit up some of the underground clubs out there and get a feel for the scene, and like, I was blown away because when I was growing up there was absolutely none of that. I mean, or if there was, it was just completely over my head. But I don't, I think that it's been a really recent development as far as the house and techno scene there. But there were so many little cool like dives and like 100, 200 cap rooms, or maybe even smaller. I don't even
Yeah.
know. It was so cool. There were so many. Like there was a whole stretch, and you would never know where these places were. But luckily, I had friends show me around and like take me to all these. And I was like, is this safe? Like, where are you taking me? This looks really sketchy, But then like you'd open the door and there'd be this like miraculous little hidden gem where the DJs were spinning, all vinyl and slamming insane left field underground like techno tracks that I've just never even heard out here, at any of the warehouses. And and that was 2019. So, I have to imagine in the last 2 years, despite COVID, I think that the community has still been growing. And I'm itching to go back and just like I don't know, just experience more of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the great things kind of in the last 10 years is just the increase of accessibility to whether it's DJ software or production software. It's like anyone can do this now. And
Yeah.
we're seeing it with all types of music, but I feel like electronic, especially, you can be a bedroom producer. You don't need to have a $10,000 studio. And I
Oh
think
no.
just opening that up really like is increasing the amount of artists that we get to experience as fans.
Absolutely.
You know, you obviously have a pretty serious artistic vision when it comes to what you're doing here. And I'm just wondering, going forward, and this could be both short term and long term, when you get to a place in your career where you can kind of do whatever you want on stage in regards to performance, visual art, etc., do you kind of have a vision for how you would like to present yourself?
hmm That's another good question. It's like sometimes I feel like the vision is super clear in my head, and then other days it'll shift, and I'm like, oh, is that what I want to do anymore? Or I don't know if you get experience this sometimes, but like I don't like it. Just these things are so clear in some moments and so fleeting. Or like I'll have a clear idea in my head, but then I'll see someone else's like really cool stage setup, and I'll be like, wait, no, I want
Yeah.
that. That's what I want, like in 3 years. Never mind, just like forget everything that I envisioned, because this is way cooler. So like that happens to me a lot. But let's see, I'll try and describe. I don't know. So as I mentioned before, I love, a lot of pop and R&B music too. And a couple of years ago, I went to see a Post Malone show. And I think it was like, actually, yeah, just 2 years ago. And his stage setup was so cool. Like I want something like that. So he had just this like minimal rectangular, like light box above him hanging. And from it was just like descending 100 beautiful like spotlights in like shades of pink and blue and purple, very like soft kind of sexy colors,
Mhm.
and it was really just him on stage, very minimal. So I feel like a lot of it came down to like having an incredible lighting designer, um, just playing with and creating illusions of dimension using that box and then the lights in it. So, as someone who really appreciates that minimal sound in dance music, I've always wanted something, stage wise that reflects that as well, that kind of highlights that. So like, I like sounds that are and tracks that are very kind of hollow, where it sounds like you're maybe in a cave and there's a lot of like, sounds kind of ricocheting and bouncing. And Visually, I love lighting design and set design that looks minimal and also kind of emulates that, where like you have shadows and light kind of bouncing around. And yeah, I tend to like sort of very pretty soft colors like purples and blues, and as opposed to, like, I guess in my mind, like a harder color like red or like a bright yellow. So I think I don't know if that kind of answered the question, but something, I've always wanted something very dreamy, inviting, inclusive, hollow, lights that play against like space and shadow and creating like dimension,
Oh,
something like
absolutely. And
that.
I mean, that's great. And I think it's funny because it's so easy, I think, in electronic to get sucked into the, who can have more lasers and fire
Yeah,
game, you know.
totally. Yeah,
It's like, don't get me wrong, like when I go to see Eric Prydz and the
yeah.
lasers shine, like I'm
Oh
down.
yeah, I'm all about it. Yes.
But it's refreshing, it's very refreshing to see somebody do something different. I know, I think I guess that, I don't know if the tour ended up happening because of COVID, but I know Fortet had a kind of concept similar to what you're describing planned. Just musically, I mean, maybe you know them, but I was curious if you're a fan of Polo and Pan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. They have that amazing circle video online, and that it just, I think, captures their spirit so
Yeah.
well. Just the whimsy, I feel like they just remind me of like Greek mythology, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're funny
they're
guys.
super cool. Yeah, and I was actually on the drive home from San Diego this weekend, was listening to their new album. Again, very mystical kind of stuff. Super, super cool.
Yeah, cool use of empty space. Just a follow up, and then I'm just curious, like when you think about that live piece, do you see yourself ever trying to go down the route of a live performance or a mixed hybrid live?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, and I guess it's a natural question just because I do play instruments. Well, I play the piano and I sing. So yeah, I mean, that sounds so freaking cool. And like it sounds like well, at the moment it sounds almost like an impossible challenge, because I'm like, I still am at the point where I would like to learn how to master the decks first, as a DJ. But I'm sure there's going to come a point where I feel like I've maybe not, completely mastered it. I feel like maybe that I don't know if you ever hit that point where you're like, oh yes, I just no, I'm the master DJ. But I'm sure there's going to come a point where I have that itch to kind of express myself additionally, where it's like, okay, I feel really comfortable on the decks. Like now I feel ready to maybe explore singing, live on stage in some capacity. Yeah, I don't know what the hybrid setup would look like yet for myself, but loosely in my mind, I feel like that's something that I need to aspire to. It would almost be like a waste not to try and explore that. Yeah.
Definitely. What does the next year, the next few months look for you in regards to putting out music?
So I have a couple collaborations that are either finished and already slated to come out, or in the works currently in terms of like the mixing and mastering process. So I do have a couple more collaborations coming out that I'm really excited about. But honestly, besides that, I'm really sort of uh, I'm going back to the drawing board and back to the studio to try and work on the next, body of work that is my own solo work. And yeah, it's fun and also scary. You had mentioned this past year for me being kind of like a very uh, sort of fast trajectory in terms of musical output. And yeah, and looking back on it now, it does seem that way. And I kind of don't know how I did all that. I don't know if you ever experienced that as well, where you're like, you look back and you're like, wait, whoa, like, how did I like knock that all out?
Yeah.
I don't understand. Cause I feel like, if someone were to like, be like, could you like recreate this last year of music? Like, I don't know if I could, if I could, right? So, I feel a bit of pressure to kind of keep that momentum going. But at the same time, I, you know, I always want to challenge myself to like do something different and do something new with each release. And so, yeah, I mean, not it. I wouldn't say it's as drastic as like a reinvention with every EP, but you know, I want to make sure that every EP I put out sounds like myself, but you know, different from the last. And it takes time. You know, it takes time to create something that sort of checks those boxes. Yeah.
Are there any vocalists or singers that you would just absolutely love to get into the studio with you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is like total pipe dream, but like I absolutely love Billie Eilish. And
That
if
would be
like
awesome.
right, like if I somehow manage to get Billie on like a techno track, I don't even know. I think my mind would just explode.
It's honestly like, obviously, I'm sure, you know, someone like that is so busy and has such like
Yeah,
far laid out plans for music, but
right.
she would be the best vocalist for electronic music. Like, I just
Which
have no
yes,
doubt, like
right.
the way her voice is, it needs to happen. So Billy,
It needs, yes.
if you see
Yes.
this,
If somehow you're watching this, Billy, like we need you. But she's probably busy like composing the next James Bond,
yeah,
you know,
seriously,
score.
like,
So yeah.
what hasn't she done at like age 12? I mean, it's really crazy.
Right. I think she's like 13 now, finally. No.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really crazy. Well, I have two more questions for you. One is, I'm coming back around.
Oh,
You can switch it to just be like someone you'd like to play back to back with, if that's easier.
oh my gosh. You know, there are so many people that I would love to play back to back with, and really just try and learn from, you know. But I'd say, okay, this past weekend I finally got to see Danny Days play
Oh,
for the first time, and he just like blew my mind. And I know he's coming to LA to play for the Into the Woods party this Friday, which I'm absolutely going to, because I'm like, I need to see this madman again. He is like, that is what he is, a madman behind the deck. So I would love to play with him and learn from him. I would also love to either, you know, have on my lineup or play with Maceo Plex. He is someone that I just absolutely look up to as a DJ and, you know, as a producer as well. But I had the opportunity to see him play for the first time in Ibiza right before the world shut down. And I saw him at Privilege in the main room. And yeah, that
yeah.
you know, that was just a very, I think, again, strong, like sort of first DJ set to see like in Ibiza, you know. But he blew my mind. I mean, it was just one of those sets where I was like, what is he even doing up there? You know, so like, you know, sometimes you're like, okay, yeah, I can understand like how this person is mixing. You can hear the transitions and you can kind of wrap your head around what's going on. This was one of those sets where I was like, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's triggering, whether he's using, you know, trigger pads or, you know, if he's even playing on CDJs. Like, I don't understand what's going on sonically. It's just too epic.
Yeah,
But
he's really on another level. He just was here on the the third, on Saturday, whatever. He was just here on Saturday and he played like a 3:30 a.m. to sunset set at the
oh my
Mirage. And
gosh, did
yeah.
he really? Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds so good.
And then he went back to back with Stephen Bodson
Oh my
to
gosh.
close. So
Oh, great.
it was, you know, that was okay. It was okay. It was decent.
It was decent.
Yeah.
You had an okay time.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was whatever. But no, he's really special. I kind of had a feeling you were going to say that. Just because
Really?
I don't know, I could just see it, like, just the way his sound is, and I think you guys would be a good pairing. But
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
the
No.
the last question I have for you before I let you go is just if there's any artists, whether they're up and coming or otherwise, that you've really found yourself listening to a lot recently.
Oh, that's a good question. That is yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think what I've been listening to recently. I feel like, well, okay, so Someone's Productions, who I do really love. I mean, I don't know how like up and coming he is. I think and he's on the rise for sure. I don't know for exactly how long he's been producing and doing this, but his name is one that I'm definitely seeing, come up now, and that's A Vision. And is he from New York, actually?
I actually don't know, but
I think,
definitely had a great couple years.
yeah, I think he might be from New York. But just I love all the music that's been coming from him recently, and I've been seeing his name pop up more on some really spectacular lineups, and so yeah, him. And actually, you know what? Now that's reminding me, there are a lot of amazing names like in the UK that I think are really exciting, like Jaden Thompson, so good, and yeah, just a lot of the stuff that is coming. I've discovered a lot of these new artists actually from Danny Howard's like radio show, and he likes to support a good mix of like the more established artists as well as some of these like younger names. So yeah, just really cool artists coming out of the UK in general. I think a lot of like, I feel like I see them being like the next generation.
Yeah, no, it feels like there is so much talent out there, and I mean, especially it's like the competition level is super high, and I know a lot of these guys are friends, but it's like when you have to bring your A game every single time, because it's just there's so many people. Well, listen, that's all I got, but thank you so much for coming on. This was really great, and
thank you for having me.
For our listeners in New York, you'll be here on September 18th, I think, right, at the Brooklyn
Woo!
Mirage.
Yeah, both the day there's like a matinee. So cool. I was like, well, I've never heard the word matinee used in the context of like a dance, of like a rave. But yes, I'll be playing both the matinee and the nighttime Mirage show.
That's awesome. Well, we're really looking forward to it, and hopefully we can share a drink in person at the Mirage.
Yes, I would love to do that, and a slice of New York pizza.
Oh yeah. All right. I'll hit you with all the recommendations.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.